What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, May 24th, 2016, getting down toward the end of the month, coming up on summer. You wouldn't know it to look at some parts of California. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Our third hour guest today is Dave Martin. He also goes by the handle DC Dave, and he has been involved in the citizens' investigation into the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster right from the very, very beginning. He is currently locked in a fearsome debate with the author of a new theory that claims Vince Foster really did kill himself. He was just someplace embarrassing, and the panicked White House staff just dumped him in Fort Marcy Park, trying to reconcile the evidence with maintaining the myth that it was a suicide. And the author of the book has basically gone on a rampage demanding that DC Dave retract what he said and, and support the position. And there's a smell of panic around this author, Peshman, and there's a smell of panic around Hillary Clinton's campaign because this topic just became current. Donald Trump, in a recent interview, came on out and said there is something funny about the 1993 death of Deputy White House Counsel Vincent Foster. And he says there's something very fishy about it. Actually, it's a whole whale, and it's stinking from top to bottom. And, of course, the corporate media is out there going ballistic. Oh, this is all tinfoil hat conspiracy theory nonsense. The Washington Post called it far-fetched. And it isn't far-fetched. I mean, first of all, just a couple of points we're going to hit. We're going to spend the whole third hour talking about this, but I want to hit a couple of points. First of all, the gun found with Vince Foster's body was dark blued steel. Foster's fingerprints were not on it. In fact, there were no fingerprints at all. And I think we can pretty much presume that Vince Foster didn't wipe that gun clean himself after it was used. Now, the thing that really alerted me initially that something was odd with the story is the photo that was leaked by the White House to Reuters and run on ABC and everything shows Foster's hand and the gun. There is not a speck of blood anywhere on the hand, the sleeve, the gun. And by the way, the only DNA they found on that gun was Hispanic in origin. They couldn't even link that gun to Foster with DNA testing. Now, if you have ever seen a real suicide by gunshot to the mouth, there is blood and splatter everywhere. And the heart keeps on beating after the brain is dead. And it is a huge mess. But we had this absolutely clean white sleeve, no drops of blood anywhere. And that's when I said, bing, something's wrong with this whole story. Now, the other part that you need to keep in mind, the FBI, when they interviewed Foster's wife, Lisa, showed her what the FBI described as a silver-colored gun and asked her to identify it, which she did. Now, presumably this was the nickel-plated revolver that Vince Foster inherited from his father. But obviously it is not the gun seen in the photograph, which is dark blued steel. And in that FD 302 form by the FBI, they do not write down the gun serial number, which is normal chain of evidence procedure, so that everybody knows you're talking about the same weapon. You don't just say it's a silver-colored gun and presume that that is a courtroom-worthy piece of evidence. Now, Robert Fisk took the FBI's interview with Lisa Foster, stripped out the reference to the silver-colored gun, and presented it as evidence Lisa Foster had identified the dark blued steel gun found with the body. So this is not far-fetched. And there's a lot more, and I'm sure DC Dave and I are going to get into it. And again, if you go to WhatReallyHappened.com, I have reprised my article on the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, which was the very, very first article I wrote in my involuntary transition from feature film work to being a truth activist. So you might want to go through there and look at all the evidence that's been accumulated. It's not far-fetched, but we're seeing this knee-jerk reaction by the corporate media. They have to maintain the secret. They have to maintain the cover-up here. And they're failing miserably. Now, also looking at Donald Trump, he is beginning to leave the neocons way, way behind him. Trump's ascension to the GOP nomination basically is sounding the death knell for the neocon movement, which has dominated U.S. foreign policy since the presidency of George W. Bush, with all these wars into Afghanistan and Iraq and, well, pretty much everywhere else, all came out of that neocon agenda, the Project for the New American Century, and their policy paper, Rebuilding America's Defenses, where they wanted 100 years of war on the rest of the planet to make them basically run their nations for the benefit of American multinational corporations. And so they are now in decline. Over at MSNBC, they had an online poll. Do you want to see Donald Trump become the next president of the United States? As of the last time I checked, 76% of the respondents said yes, they want to see Donald Trump as the next president of the United States. Which tells us that all these polls that the corporate media are coming up with saying that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are neck and neck may be sort of creatively edited. Because certainly around here, I'm having a hard time finding anybody who wants to vote for Hillary Clinton. And this is a predominantly Democratic state. I wear that Hillary for Prison t-shirt all over, and just people are just saying, I love the shirt, and they're applauding and laughing. They're taking selfies with me. It's amazing here. Now, getting on to Hillary Clinton, she is a fraud. She's a fake from beginning to end. And one of the most recent examples of that comes out of the Washington Examiner, which did an audit and discovered 41% of Hillary Clinton's Twitter followers are fakes. It's just a fraud. She doesn't have that many people following her that she likes to pretend. And apparently over at Harvard, there's a gentleman by the name of Ortel who is basically starting to do an analysis on the Clinton Foundation, and basically saying this is probably the largest charity fraud in history. And basically says over the years that they've been running this, they're looking at almost $100 billion with a B. And Ortel has already found 40 potential areas of fraud or wrongdoing that he is going to be making public and trying to get somebody to pay attention. Now, he's fighting an uphill battle because the FTC, which has jurisdiction over charities, is out there saying, it's really not worth our time to look at the Clinton Foundation. I mean, come on, we got more important things to do here. And again, if I am correct, and Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets using her weak email server as the delivery system, and the charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments, then everybody in the federal government, including Hillary's worst enemies, wants to keep a lid on this. Because the scandal of a serving Secretary of State betraying the country and running an espionage operation out of the Department of State, that could bring the entire government down. And it should. Because all the people who were supposed to be looking out for the country and looking out for spies failed miserably. And so did President Obama. And ultimately, it's his responsibility. Now, the FBI has started an investigation into Terry McAuliffe, who was one of the Clintons' longtime associates going all the way back to Arkansas. And apparently, they're looking at his time as a board member of the Clinton Global Initiative, which is a vehicle of the charitable foundation. And apparently, they're looking at a $2 million donation to the Clinton Foundation from a Chinese billionaire. Remember what I said? This is a replay of the Chinagate scandal from 1996. And so this may be the first of the Clinton cash dominoes to fall. He's a Clinton bagman, is basically what it is. Now, Bernie Sanders wanted to have one more debate with Hillary Clinton prior to the California primary. Hillary has turned him down. Her attitude is now, I've got the nomination. There's no reason for me to debate. You know, let's just move on to the general election. It's mine, mine, mine. I stole it fair and square. Barring a revelation from the FBI or, again, Judicial Watch, I have more confidence they're going to find something. But remember, Trey Gowdy has already come out and said the Congress's Benghazi report will be coming out before the Democratic convention. And I don't think they're going to be going very gentle on the presumptive Democratic nominee. Now, you remember Guccifer, that hacker who is now basically doing a plea bargain. He's pleading guilty to cybercrime. He's making a plea bargain. And he has been out there saying that he got into Hillary Clinton's email server. He saw 10 foreign IPs logged in, just prowling through the files. And now we're getting word that Guccifer may have copied off and stashed a lot of those emails himself somewhere to use as a bargaining chip in the making of a deal. And that will be a real blow to Hillary if that, in fact, has happened. Now, I'd like to ask a question here, and I think this makes a lot of sense, and we should all be asking this. Can somebody explain to me how Hillary's private email server holding top secrets of the nation could be left wide open, but the computers over at the Clinton Foundation have absolutely perfect security? They're locked down tight. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Unless, of course, the weak security on the private email server was intentional to make it easier to deliver secrets to donors to the Clinton Foundation. Over in Washington State, Bernie Sanders supporters are very upset. They've been blocked at the caucus before they could even get in and speak, and this article is written by one of the Sanders supporters who showed up and was told his name just wasn't on the list anymore. Nobody could explain why. The only explanation that was given to him was the Sanders campaign had removed his name, but the Sanders campaign said, no, we didn't remove anybody. So Hillary is still out there playing all these little dirty tricks to guarantee herself the nomination. And remember, Hillary has a world-class education in stealing elections that she got working on the Watergate Committee, looking into Richard Nixon's committee to re-elect the president. Now, a lot of people are starting to ask if Bernie Sanders could possibly take down the Democratic establishment, because the rank-and-file Democrats are really getting fed up with Hillary Clinton. They're getting fed up with the party machine. They're fed up with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And if the Democratic voters desert the party's going to come crashing down. You can't have a political party that's only got the staff in the office. It's just absolute nonsense. And I'll tell you this, Hillary needs to rein in the arrogance a little bit, because every time they do another one of these dirty tricks to keep Sanders out, it angers his supporters. And if Hillary thinks that when she takes the nomination, Bernie Sanders supporters are going to come on board with her, it's not going to happen. They're going to desert to Trump. The only way she can counter that is if she's going to offer the vice presidency to Bernie Sanders. And she may do it. She's getting desperate. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders has formally requested a recount of the Kentucky primary election. All 120 county boards. It was a neck-and-neck race, and Hillary just magically pulled ahead in those final few hours. And so they want a recount. And if they find that the recount does not support the original official tally, I'm sure that Bernie Sanders is going to start asking for recounts in all these other primary states where he was polling ahead, and then all of a sudden, Hillary surged ahead. Now, here's an article. This is out of NWPR.org, and I cannot believe they're out there pushing this. They're out there saying that they're going to go into the GOP convention, and at this point they're saying, yes, Trump is going to be the nominee. Gosh darn those voters. They won't pick the candidates we want. Now they're going to mount a campaign to push Ted Cruz as vice president and put him on Donald Trump's ticket, which is tantamount to painting a large bullseye on Donald Trump's back. But there's a wrinkle. Ted Cruz cannot serve as vice president any more than he can serve as president because of that 12th Amendment that imposes on the vice president the exact same eligibility requirement as the president, meaning a natural-born U.S. citizen. Now, one more time for all those Ted Cruz supporters who are living in denial, Ted Cruz was born in Canada of parents who were Canadian citizens and only Canadian citizens at the time. That makes Ted Cruz a Canadian by birth and only a Canadian by birth. And because Ted Cruz's father was still married to his previous wife when Ted was born, Ted is not eligible for birthright citizenship under Section 309C of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. And I am absolutely sick and tired of all these politicians who think the rules should not apply to them. And if you don't agree with the rules, that's fine. There's a way to change it, called a constitutional amendment. But you're not just allowed to get up and say, well, I don't like that rule because it's keeping me from being the president, and I'm just going to pretend it isn't a factor. Because that is not good leadership. We don't want to have any more politicians who think the rules don't apply to them. Because it's those rules, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that protect the people from abusive government. Now, moving on to the war zones, the United States is now making noises that they're not going to allow, as if they could, stop it, Russia, Turkey, Iran to unite against ISIS. U.S. is saying, no, you can't do that. We're not going to let you combine against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We know the reason. ISIS and Al-Qaeda work for the United States. And right now in Syria, between Russia and Iran, the U.S. proxies are getting their clocks cleaned. Meanwhile, we're seeing a very alarming article coming out of RIMF.com. The United States is now conducting war games, simulated attacks against Russia and China to see how they might react. Which actually you don't need to do a lot of simulation to realize that if you attack Russia and China, they're going to counterattack. And sooner or later, it's going to go nuclear. Now, a Russian diplomat, foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, is basically out there calling Euronews on the carpet for having faked a Twitter posting that was an outright piece of propaganda. The Twitter account that it supposedly came from doesn't even exist. And Euronews got caught lying yet again here. Up in Ukraine, rather interesting statistic. Since the junta in Kiev started trying to recapture the eastern Ukrainian republics, in the years 2014 and early 2015, Ukraine lost more than half of its military equipment, meaning they are losing and losing badly. Wars ultimately come down to attrition. Whoever runs out of money and munitions first loses, and that's exactly what's going on. Meanwhile, Brazilian newspaper Folha de Sao Paulo has revealed a leaked tape proving that the removal of President Dilma Rousseff was an organized coup d'etat. Imagine my shock. All right, let's talk about Egypt Air Flight 804. They're now acknowledging that the human remains that have been recovered so far do show evidence of an explosion. And the U.S. is out there saying, oh, see, this proves it was terror. There's absolutely terror. It must be terror. There couldn't be any other explanation for people being blown to bits on an airplane than an act of terror. Really tell that to all those people who died on that Iranian Airbus shot down by the USS Vincent, or all the passengers of TWA 800 who were blown out of the sky by accident during a testing of Aegis CEC. Military shoot-downs of civilian planes is an historical reality. The United Nations acknowledges at least 25 such cases, most of which still remain classified. You're supposed to just believe the plane fell apart, or you're supposed to believe that the pilot was suicidal, or some other such nonsense. But it does happen. And we know that Egypt Air flight was flying over an active U.S. military exercise involving the United States and other regional allies, including Israel. And the Egyptian media is saying an Israeli jet shot down Flight 804. They're saying it was an accident, but they still think that's what happened. All right, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about the economy now a little tiny bit. Moody's has just downgraded Deutsche Bank to just 2 notches above junk. Deutsche Bank is where their stock has been tumbling ever since Deutsche was forced to admit that they've been sort of having a little bit of fun with the bookkeeping. They were involved in interest rate manipulations, metals manipulation. People are beginning to wake up and realize that these large giant banks are all a bunch of crooks. Deutsche Bank's post-crisis mortgage positions are being probed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And you know, if the SEC is actually taking notice, it must be serious. Because when it was just Bernie Madoff ripping off his investors for $60 billion, the SEC couldn't be bothered. So there's something serious going on over there. J.P. Morgan's private bank is laying off nearly 100 employees. And it's getting more interesting than that. The world's 16 largest banks are now facing LIBOR lawsuits that could actually ruin them. This includes J.P. Morgan Chase & Company and Citigroup. They're looking at antitrust lawsuits, accusing them of hurting investors who bought securities tied to LIBOR by rigging that interest rate benchmark. Now, the appellate judges reversed a lower court ruling on one issue, whether the investors had adequately claimed in their complaints to have been harmed, while sending the cases back to the judge to consider issue whether the plaintiffs are the proper parties to sue. Because their claims, if successful, provide for triple damages that could absolutely empty the banks. And you know what's going to happen. The government's going to turn around and say, well, that's okay. We'll just take money from the American people and put it back into the banks so the banks can go on, because banks are so much more important than human beings in this country, really. Nokia is announcing they're cutting jobs worldwide anywhere between 10 and 15,000. And I got to tell you, this next one really bothers me. Apparently, New York, the city, is suing Domino's Pizza and 3 of its franchises. Apparently, they have been engaging in wage theft to the tune of $565,000 at 10 New York-based stores. Now, that is really tacky, and this gets back to what I was saying before. If you are not paying workers decent wages and salaries, then how are they going to go down to the shopping malls and buy what the corporations are selling? That is such common sense. It's amazing that all the money junkies are in denial. But then, you know, money junkies, they're addicts, and they don't think clearly. Now, the Greek Parliament has pushed through yet more austerity measures in order to qualify for additional rescue loans from European creditors, which actually, in the long term, makes the problem worse. And this is going to provide more fuel for the Brexit. Now, there's a little bit of good news. Remember Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF? She's now in court. She's about to be formally charged with embezzlement and fraud, which may lead to her resignation from the IMF. And, of course, it doesn't make the world's banking system look good when people in these high positions keep getting, arrested and sent to court here. And at least over in France, they're prosecuting these crimes, as opposed to here in the United States of America, where bankers can do whatever they want and not face arrest or prosecution or jail. Now, there's another article over here in counterpunch.org, What Britain Forgot, Making Things Matters. And it says Britain's current financial turmoil is based on the fact that most of their economy is in financial services. And they let their manufacturing decline. And we've got the same problem here in the United States of America. You cannot make a nation prosperous by just taking the money and shaking it back and forth and hoping it's going to grow. You have to have manufactured goods or agricultural produce to sell. And if you forget that, you are in trouble. We will be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy, and it's rather interesting to see how the propaganda works regarding the Brexit, because there's an article in the Telegraph in Great Britain, and I'm going to read you the headline verbatim. Interest rates could go up or down after Brexit vote, says Mark Carney. Well, by golly, I'm sure glad we got that sorted out, because I was kind of worried. Yeah, I think we can say probably the interest rates will go either up or down, because they always do. But somebody wanted to get on out there and say, we can't do Brexit, and that was the best they could come up with. Now, David Cameron's former advisor, Steve Hilton, is now backing the Brexit from what he describes as the impenetrable and hubristic European Union. And he's out there. This is Cameron's ex-policy advisor saying it's time for Great Britain to take back power. It's the ideal choice for our times. And opposition to David Cameron is beginning to grow to the point where he could actually face a no-confidence vote by his own members of Parliament over his handling of the EU referendum. Now, let's see. A story coming out of the Express, also in Great Britain. Brexit will liberate Europe by triggering mass anti-Brussels backlash. Everybody is expecting that when Great Britain breaks free of the European Union, absent massive election fraud, it's going to trigger a cascade, because we know there are other member nations of the European Union that are already talking about leaving. Finland's going to have a referendum now. France is talking about leaving. Denmark's talking about leaving. It's amazing. Over in France, the protests over austerity are not only continuing, they are accelerating. The French strikes and riots have now shut down 850 gas stations. They're blocking refineries, interrupting the supply chain for fuels to the entire country. The French police are breaking up these blockades with water cannon and tear gas, basically saying we're not going to have any reforms. We just like things fine the way they are. You will make do with less to make the bankers richer, and you might as well get used to it now. The Paris transport workers are saying they're going to have their strike, if necessary, indefinitely. Metro bus and rail workers are joining the strike by the CGT union starting next Thursday to protest over the new labor laws. And what they're really talking about here is, again, it's just another form of austerity. Longer work, lower pay, less protections, less rights. Story coming out, well, actually, it's a YouTube video. The masses are waking up. Nuit debout gatherings are spreading in Europe. They're starting to organize these anti-European Union groups to basically say, this is it. It's been a disaster. The EU has been a disaster for Europe. The only beneficiaries of the European Union have been the unelected government in Brussels and the European Central Bank. Now, if you are a traveler, and you've probably been paying attention to all these stories about the TSA lines and how the airlines are trying to reduce the stress and tension. They've got clowns out there, and they've got puppy dogs that you can pet to de-stress you and everything. The head of the TSA security operations has now been removed from his position. He's on paid leave, but apparently he's botched this whole thing up so bad. And then I think where they came out yesterday with the statement that even though Congress had handed them, the TSA, another $35 million, the lines were going to get longer anyway. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Something has to be done. And the TSA is out there talking about how they're there for the security of everybody, and you're just going to have to put up with it. The reality is that in 15 years, the TSA has not caught a single real terrorist. 95% of the practice bombs sent through by the Department of Homeland Security pass the TSA. They don't find them. They're really good at stealing things from luggage, personal electronic devices, and let's be honest, they still owe me for that laptop of mine they dropped and smashed up in Seattle. So, yeah, this is a classic government operation. Expensive, inconvenient, and accomplishing absolutely nothing of any substantive value. All righty, let's grab a phone call. Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there? Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. What's going on?
Okay, I want to talk to you about Hillary.
Yes.
And we know in the past that all the presidential candidates have been pre-selected. And what boggles me is why would they even select Hillary to begin with when she has ailing health problems? She has so much baggage. Is she being set up to lose?
No, she's not being set up to lose. She wants that White House. She wants to be the first woman president of the United States of America. And because of all the things the Clintons have been involved in over the years, going all the way back to the Iran-Contra gun and drug running operation, which the northern end of that was in Arkansas while Bill Clinton was governor there. They know where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies. And basically, Hillary is telling the entire U.S. government, you will make me president of the United States or I'll start destroying careers.
Okay, so you think that's what's behind that?
Yes.
Okay, I got a recommendation for a video that I saw, if you could possibly put it up, or at least check it out.
Okay.
It's a speech by a guy called Myron C. Fagan.
Yeah.
And it's a 1967 speech, and he's talking about the New World Order. And it's a 2.5-hour speech, and I've learned so much about history in that one speech alone that I have in my lifetime. He's given all the people behind the New World Order, how they planned and orchestrated all the events practically in our United States history. And if you have a chance, I'd recommend it to everybody. I think everybody in the United States should listen to that, and they'd be disgusted on how we are being played like cattle. The way they think of us as just, nothing. They'll send us to war for no reason.
Oh, no, they got a reason. They got a really good reason. The reason right now is they're trying to preserve the dollar's hegemonic domination of the global economy by waging war against the ruble and the yuan. There's always a good reason for a war. In fact, there are usually multiple reasons for wars and assassinations. And by the way, this idea that there is a single group in control of the planet, that's nonsense. What you have are different political factions who are each pursuing their own agenda, and sometimes they overlap and they cooperate, sometimes they don't overlap, and, it gets a little bit sticky. But there are a lot of groups that like to pretend they're calling the shots, but there's several of them, and many times they're working at cross purposes to each other.
Yeah, no, he does get into that, and he lists all the groups and how they all split up, and how they're given duties and how to infiltrate the. One group is to take part of the politics, another the media, another control of the riots, and it goes on and on and on.
Well, I think his view is oversimplistic. Again, because there are so many different groups. Coming from a career in the media in Hollywood, we know we've got certainly the Israeli influence. We have the FBI's informants, copying off scripts and sending them to Washington, D.C. to make sure nobody's embarrassing the FBI. We have Mockingbird all over the place. Sometimes they're cooperating, sometimes not. And then, of course, you have corporate interests coming on in and wanting to do simple things like product placement or others. So there are competing interests in all of these areas. They're not always coordinated, and I think it's an oversimplistic view to think that there's some group saying, we're calling the shots for all these different things. There are several groups that like to pretend they're calling the shots on several things, but again, they're not coordinated. Thank you very much for the phone call, Steve. We're going to let you go here. We got to get back onto the news. As we mentioned before, the Chilcot report is due out shortly after the Brexit vote. The inside word is it is not going gentle on Tony Blair and many of the other figures in the British government who basically, let's call it what it is. They lied the British people into a war of conquest. And apparently Jeremy Corbyn is waiting for the report to come on out, but if it is as it is being leaked in advance, he's going to call for Tony Blair to face a war crimes trial. As well he should. Let's be honest about that, okay? Now, here's a very, very bizarre story. As you know, there's been still is, this horrible fire going on up in Canada, centered on Fort McMurray. It's spread into neighboring areas. It's going to be burning for months. Nobody knows how this got out of control, why the Canadian government wasn't using their biggest water bomber, why they refused an offer by the Russians for their world-class water bombers. It's almost like they wanted this thing to go out of control. And here's where it gets weird. There's a story coming out of SOT.net saying that the people who live in Fort McMurray are being required to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the government before they can return to their homes. Why? If this is just a wildfire and an accident, why are they being asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement? It doesn't make any sense at all. Something's going on up there. Alrighty, well, let's talk a little bit about human-caused global warming. And some of the stuff they're coming up with to try and convince us that, you know, it's a crisis and we've got to go along with buying and selling carbon credits and paying carbon taxes and everything. There's an article that came out of no less than the Washington Post saying that because of global warming, grizzly bears and polar bears are now interbreeding. They're creating a new species of Pisleys, I guess is a good name for it, or something. Now, animals do crossbreed naturally. There's a lot of evidence for that. And the claim here is that grizzlies and polar bears never meet normally, but because of global warming, the polar bears are being driven onto the land and they're meeting with the grizzlies and they're going down to the bar and picking each other up or something like that. It's ridiculous. There are probably at least 100 different reasons why this could have happened. And mind you, they've only found one of these. It's not like they're documenting a trend. They found one. Another article came out of What's Up From That talking about another headline saying that if we don't stop global warming right now, there will be crocodiles and palm trees in the Arctic. Yeah. Remember when the one of the founders of Greenpeace came on out and said that Greenland was going to lose all of its ice in 20 years? And that was 16 years ago. And Greenland still has all of its ice. In fact, it's got a little bit more. Out here in the real world, they had snow hit in Northern California, snarling up a freeway. We're not talking a light dusting. We're talking enough snow fell to snarl up the traffic. Up in Calgary, it snowed hard enough for them to have to get out the snowplows again to keep the roads clean. We're just weeks away from the official start of summer. Down under, below the equator where they're heading into their winter, it has hit early and hard, and they're already celebrating in New Zealand. The ski resorts can open. It's amazing. Alrighty, let's talk about computers a little tiny bit here. The rise of the meta-criminal. Is the NSA manipulating the stock market? Wouldn't put it past them. They certainly have the computer power to do it. But apparently Trevor Timm of the Electronic Freedom Frontier has dug up this very interesting nugget inside a December 2013 White House Task Force report on spying and snooping. And under recommendations number 31, section 2, there's a quote, government should not use their offensive cyber capabilities to change the amounts held in financial accounts or otherwise manipulate financial systems. And so he's asking, why is this warning even in the report? It would suggest it had been happening. And they were saying it's not a nice thing to do. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Steve in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hello, Michael Rivero. We love your show. I'm just calling because last night me and my wife was listening to this guy named Sanchez on Global Star Network.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the Libertarian Party is coming up with two former governors in their attempt to, try to get a theft of the presidency away from Trump, or, if Trump can actually get it, But, a third-party candidate that's two former governors might bring in a lot of votes and make it very difficult for Trump to win. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, this is reinforcing something I observed the other day. Regardless of what political party or who is coming in or who's going out, it's always about we have to stop Trump. They never talk about stopping Hillary. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about challenging Hillary or keeping her from the White House. It's always Donald Trump. We've got to stop Donald Trump, because if Donald Trump wins the White House, Hillary is going to start spilling the beans on a bunch of careers around this town.
And Trump is an outsider to them all.
Yeah, that's basically it. Trump is not going along with the war agenda. He wants to go back to being friends with Russia and China, wants to go back to doing business with them. And obviously he represents a significant change in foreign policy, whereas Hillary is out there saying, what we're doing is great, what we're doing works, and now we've got transgender bathrooms, men can shower in the girls' locker room. That's progress for the American culture. And, Susan Sarandon really said it best. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo is not working.
Yeah. Well, we got to pray for Donald Trump. He needs our help.
Absolutely. Got to get out there and campaign for him, put signs in your front yard. And apparently a lot of the dump Trump people are now running around stealing signs off of people's lawns for Donald Trump. That's another tactic that's used very commonly.
Yeah.
And
they have nothing will stop them.
That's why I'm very, very concerned that between now and the GOP convention, there will be a serious attempt on Donald Trump's life. And I don't want to see it happen, but it is a real, real possibility.
Yeah,
we have to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about this illegal immigrant refugee situation. It is totally, totally out of control. We have record numbers of illegal immigrants pouring into the country. We are seeing state elections boards insisting that nobody has to show an ID and prove that they're a U.S. citizen to vote, which is nonsense. You must be a U.S. citizen to vote. It is illegal to allow non-citizens to vote. But right now, Hillary is depending on that illegal immigrant vote. She's campaigning to the illegals, saying, vote for me, and I'm going to take away a bunch of stuff from the legal American citizens and give it to you, the illegals. And if they're breathing and can push a button on an election machine, they are welcome in, because today's illegal immigrants are tomorrow's Democrats. And we are seeing people come into this country who really should not be here. They're arriving with contagious diseases, scabies, HIV, H1N1, bubonic plague, infectious tuberculosis. A lot of them are coming in with mental disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder. They're just giving the country away. Now, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency has taken immediate drastic steps. They have opened a brand new detention center for transgenders. So if you're coming across the border and you're saying, I'm actually a lesbian trapped in a man's body, you're going to go over to this brand new, shiny, taxpayer-funded transgender detention center. In order to balance the books, ICE has released 86,288 illegal aliens into the U.S. streets known to have criminal records. Another article coming out of RINF.com. Terrorists, rapists, and criminals among the refugees. But hey, who cares? We're just going to bring them on here because that's the new world order, just blending everybody together. It really is out of control. And again, it is a failed policy. The new world order people actually thought that they were going to be able to blend all of these cultures together, and we'd all sit in a circle around the campfire and sing Kumbaya. But it's not working because people are feeling like their identity is under attack with all this new culture coming in. Apparently, there's a big stink with these Sharia patrols that are basically self-declared. They don't actually have any legal authority. They're going around Europe demanding that bars close their doors that bottle shops close their doors because Islam bans alcohol. And it's just causing more and more friction. And it's another reason the European Union is going to tear itself apart. This plan to just put all of humanity into a single blender and hit puree isn't working out. And they won't quit because people at that elevated position in society can't admit that they made a mistake. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we've already got a caller waiting on the line. John in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I'm a very avid listener to yourself. I do also listen to Joyce Riley, and she had a recommendation for a YouTube called The Unspeakable Evil. So I watched that on the weekend. It's a 3-hour YouTube documentary. I think it's a rehash of one of the older Waco documentaries, and I found something very interesting when I was halfway through. It mentioned the 4 ATF guys that were killed on the assault.
Yes.
So, so you're watching the documentary, and then it's very detailed, and it shows autopsy photos. So 3 of these guys are shot in the temple with exit wounds in the back of their head. And as it turns out, all 4 of those guys that were killed were formerly Bill Clinton bodyguards. I wonder if you knew that.
Yeah, I did know that, in fact.
Yeah, and so actually, and if you search the Waco siege on Wikipedia, the names of the guys come up. They're not highlighted at all. And that's funny. You think that the only 4 guys that were killed in that raid, not even Wikipedia doesn't even elaborate on any of the background of those guys. It just says their names. So I thought that was very interesting how the media can suppress things, and you can, unless you really dig down into some topics, you miss a lot unless guys like yourself highlight that stuff.
Well, one of the reasons that those 4 gentlemen were marginalized was not only because they were former Secret Service, but because they had been shot at a very close range, which made it very obvious that those people inside the church didn't do it. And the evidence is that the people inside the church did not have any working firearms on the premises to begin with. Now, the reason there were guns there at all is that the Branch Davidian commune, if you will, earned their money, paid their own way, by buying and selling used guns and repairing them and reselling them. And as a matter of fact, all of the working weapons were out that day at a gun show. And the people who were at the gun show were trying to get back to the church, and the police and FBI wouldn't let them through. But when you look at the photos of the aftermath of the fire, there's a photograph of their storage room for the guns, and all the guns are still there. And they're covered with ashes and other debris, which shows they were never taken out and used. They didn't have any working guns there. If you look at the bullet holes in the front of the church, they're all going in, not out. And this was an incredible botch-up. And the reason for it is really very simple. The BATF had only recently been given police powers. They had had several PR disasters in a row. Congress was looking at rescinding their enforcement powers and even cutting their budget, and they needed a newsworthy publicity stunt to prove how necessary they were. And so they said, well, we're going to go over and raid this church, and they've got all these guns, and we'll just say there's a bunch of Texas gun nuts, and we'll look good in the media. Unfortunately, they invited the reporters to go along on the raid, one of whom was friends with David Koresh. And he calls Koresh on the phone and says, are you aware the BATF is coming on over to raid your church and confiscate your weapons? And Koresh said, well, I wasn't, but they can come on in. There's nothing here that's illegal. So the BATF shows up, Koresh opens the door, and he's immediately shot in the groin area. And it just went downhill from there. And after the standoff had gone on long enough, they just said, we can't, this is a PR disaster. We're going to burn the place to the ground, gas them to death with a poison gas that's illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war. We'll claim it was a mass suicide. We'll have Hollywood make movies that Koresh was just this insane person. And that's kind of where it all went.
Yeah, no, total correct summary. The other thing I found out was that the bunker supposedly had a shaped charge put on the roof, and when they went to re-examine the rubble from the bunker, the section of the debris that would give any evidence of the shaped charge was not there. It was a complete cover-up.
Well, it was a complete cover-up, first of all, that they'd used that CS gas, and as a propellant they'd used, I think it was methyl acrylate, which is like the stuff they use to melt plexiglass, to bend it, and it just absolutely fries your lungs. They did not want any survivors coming out of that church, and that's exactly what they got. And then they had just claimed it was a mass suicide. They bulldozed the place 6 inches down into the soil and took it all away and buried it in a top-secret location.
Don't you think that was quite a coincidence that the 4 guys were former Bill Clinton bodyguards? I mean, that defies any logic or odds.
No, well, it does, but they weren't the only bodyguards of Bill Clinton to meet suspicious deaths. And apparently these were guys who saw Bill Clinton when he was doing things that were politically embarrassing, such as all of his extramarital affairs and who knows what all else. But there were, even down in Arkansas, some of the Arkansas patrol officers who were his personal protective detail met very strange and suspicious ends. It's all on the Clinton body count list.
Yeah, I've read it, and it's very good, Mike. And thanks. Appreciate your comment.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Say hello.
Aloha, Nui. What's on your mind?
Well, you're probably not the one I should pick the phone with about this because of the intellectualness about the article and so forth. It's on RBN site. But the one about having to deal with the Girl Scouts up in upstate New York or wherever the heck it is, dealing with the aspect of transgenderism and so forth, as far as a child goes. But I think what gets me is that, one, unless you're a member of the Addams family, when does a child, a baby, have a mustache, hair on the chest, and who knows what, and pass off as a baby boy? When you have a grown man wearing a Girl Scout outfit, to exaggerate a point.
Well, it's, again, he was trying to make a point, and I don't think he was expecting to be taken very, very seriously about it. But it's like me with my guppies, or the fact that I self-identify with being a well-paid talk show radio host. It is a ridiculous idea, and it's being pushed as a distraction, partly. The other part of it is, I think, again, this is part of this plan to make us question our identity, to destroy our sense of self, to destroy our cultural, regional, ethnic, historical identity, and even get us confused about what gender we really are, because they think it's going to make us easier to control. But, of course, this thing has backfired horribly, and it's made the Obama administration look even stupider than they were before.
Well, like I was saying, the aspect of making society question its background as to what it is or is not or whatever have you, but using extreme visual for that, it's like, come on. I mean, look at it this way. You have actors like Jay Davison, like, who are some other ones? Gary Oldman.
Okay, yes.
They're basically chameleon in nature. They're androgynous. They can pretty much do whatever character their work involves them to be, for that matter.
Well, I
Hilary
remember.
Swank is another one.
Well, I remember Robin Williams did an amazing job as Mrs. Doubtfire, and then there was Tootsie with with makeup and everything. You can make anything happen, but I think it really does come down to penis, vagina, and that will just sort it all out. And this idea that we are what we imagine ourselves to be. We need to come back to the real world.
Well, Michael, it's interesting you said it because is it a matter of what we imagine ourselves to be or is it what we are spiritually?
Well, it's what we are physically in this particular case. And this idea
now
that...
you back to another aspect. How does that confine to, if you really want to blur the scenario, how would that apply to people that have both sexes?
Well, that's such a tiny, tiny minority of the human population.
Well, that's true, but they exist.
I know they do exist, and it's a birth defect. But this whole idea that there's a bunch of people running around who are really secretly women inside a male body, I think they're
You're a
seriously.
lesbian in a man's body?
Yeah, I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. It really is an attempt to sort of undermine our sense of our gender identity. Now, that being said, I will concede that all of us have both male and female personality traits. In fact, it's known that the higher your IQ, the more you tend to incorporate both of them. But that's in a very fuzzy area of what's going on in the mind. And when it comes to assigning restrooms and locker rooms, I think you just got to go with the plumbing. And, you know, the penises go over here and the vaginas go over here, and that's it. And, you know, if somebody's in you know, a male body and he thinks he might be something else, that's a seriously confused individual. That's not a reason to allow them to walk into the ladies' locker room. And as we've already seen, this whole issue has been horribly, horribly abused by some very perverted people.
Yes, it's a major smokescreen, yes.
Yeah.
You have made me wonder about one thing. Why do men have nipples?
Well, well, because we all...
They're supposed to be male, then why do they have nipples?
Because we all start out female to begin with in the womb, and then when the chromosomes come on in, some of us are flipped over to the male side, but we're still carrying some of those other aspects with us.
Well, I'm glad you explained that, because you just opened up a whole new can.
Okay. All right. Well, Francis, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over
Have a great one.
Thank you. We're going to switch over to Mandy in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I've missed a couple of your shows, well, like a week or two worth, and I was wondering, the last time I called in, I asked if you'd seen a documentary called Defamation. I wondered if you got to see it.
I don't think I did. I think I went hunting for it, and I think I ran out of time and I didn't get to watch it.
Oh, well, I really hope that you do it, because, again, it just shows the immense brainwashing that people in Israel undergo from a young age.
Well, it's hardly unique to Israel. I mean, we undergo a tremendous brainwashing, you know, here in the United States in our public schools. I mean, I remember when I was in grade school, all the brainwashing about how the commies were bad and they were evil and all these other governments were evil and our government was wonderful. That's brainwashing too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But when the topic is Israel, we always have to. There are people who are in denial about the fact that their beliefs can tend to be delusional, get to a point of delusion. So I was hoping you got to see that.
Well, ultimately, I think all beliefs are delusional. Belief is a poor substitute for reality, and I maintain that beliefs are used as chains to hold free minds slaves, because no chain of steel or iron ever bound a human being tighter than the beliefs we're indoctrinated with as children.
That's true. And I just wanted to make another point about global warming or climate change. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed this because I'm a kid from the 90s, I grew up in the 90s in public schools and everything, and we focused a lot on physical, environmental pollution. I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear concern over legitimate environmental issues like, the waste and, sewage or plastic. You don't hear that. It's all about coal and switching over to nuclear power, or it really doesn't make any sense.
It's because the legitimate environmental movement got hijacked and turned into a racket. And the people who are calling the shots now, as you say, they don't really care about pollution. They don't care about littering. They certainly are not going to deal with the amounts of pollution coming out of American corporations. Now it's all CO2 to be blamed on the American people to get them to pay carbon taxes. But look at how much damage is being caused by these wars across the globe. Contamination with depleted uranium. Nobody talks about how destructive that is. It's all about your plastic bags and your carbon dioxide. And if we make those go away, the world will be a new Garden of Eden, which is complete and utter nonsense when we have something like 1/3 of the nuclear facilities leaking tritium into the environment.
Right, and that's how we know that it's a fraud. And about the plastic bags, there are people who have invented other forms of bags that are made from natural ingredients. We have the money and we have the technology. We have the people who know how to do these things, and we're not putting money into that. So we know it's a fraud. And I'm glad that you exposed those things. Thanks for taking my call, Mike.
You got it. Thank you very much for the phone call. These biodegradable plastic bags turned out to not be as biodegradable as we were told. Here in Hawaii, plastic bags are now banned. We've gone back to paper, which does, decompose and goes into the landfill and doesn't cause any harms here. All right, let's see. We're going to take a phone call from JJ, Muscle Shoal, Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
G'day, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Appreciation. I'm a long time listener, first time caller. I've been watching your podcast here and keeping up with what really happened for as long as you've been doing it.
Ooh, you must be old.
You do a great job putting the truth out there.
Thank you.
And I think it's an inspiration that your lovely wife is so supportive and helpful.
Yes.
And that's just really good to see y'all work together like that.
Yes.
I wanted to make your audience aware that, Arbitron, the radio ratings company, is now owned by the Nielsen Company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have just filled out a Nielsen diary, and I wanted to let your audience know that you can now put podcasts like yours and internet radio and stuff in the Nielsen ratings now.
Cool.
So I listen to you guys every day. So, you have 5 days of Nielsen ratings.
Wow. I mean, that's
me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that greatly. One of the frustrating things about being in the independent media is it's almost impossible to get accurate audience numbers with which to lure advertisers to advertise on our network and on our shows. And it's been a major problem, especially because our broadcasts go out in kind of a very fragmented way. We have the live streams during the live broadcast, and there's the podcast. The podcasts get picked up, made into YouTube videos, and they go on out. We know we have some on-air AM and FM affiliates. We also know we're the darling of Part 15 radio transmitters, and apparently there are a couple of high-powered pirate stations out there that are now carrying the show. And all of it's very flattering, but we don't actually have real numbers where I can say I have got 67 people listening to my radio show.
Well, just for the people out there listening, if you are filling out a Nielsen diary or Arbitron for the ratings and stuff, podcasts like this are now eligible for this. You just write it in, the What Really Happened radio show. Instead of AM and FM, you write in Republic Broadcasting Network. That's where you are now, Drew.
Cool. Yes, this is Republic Broadcasting.
Okay, so you just put down the WhatReallyHappened.com podcast and Republic Broadcasting Network as the source, and they even give you a little space on the back. You can even write them a note to make sure that they get what you meant. So you guys are eligible for Arbitron ratings now. I just wanted to let your audience know that. So if anybody's filling out a Nielsen diary, put down the WhatReallyHappened.com radio show in the Republic Broadcasting Network, and you will get those numbers.
Well, that would really, really help us out, and thank you for sharing that information with us.
Absolutely. And you keep up the good work, sir. Honored to talk to you today.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and I'm going to keep it up just as long as I can. Thank you for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Mike, talking about William Jefferson Blythe, I want you to know, I don't know if you know this, Mike, but do you know that Bill Clinton's real name was William Jefferson Blythe? His father died in an automobile accident, and the family of Blythe was really upset that why would he change his name from Blythe to Clinton? And it's funny, Obama's father, I believe, the one in Kenya, he died in a car accident too. They both died in car accidents, and I guess he had 8 wives in Kenya. But William Jefferson Blythe, if Donald Trump really wanted to slam him, he would run the ad about this guy's real name is Blythe. Hillary was trained by Sal Lewinsky. She's a big-time commie, and he's the one that has rules for radicals.
Okay, Tom.
Let's look at
Tom. I need to calm you down here just a little bit. First of all, did Bill Clinton change his own name, or did his mother remarry and they go through the paperwork? Because if it's often not up to the kid that their name gets changed. It does happen.
No, sir. Bill Clinton changed his name because he changed it. It was up to him to change his name. I believe he was 13 years old from Blythe to Clinton. I don't believe Virginia Kelly actually had the right to change his name because that was still his birthing father was a Blythe. And I remember reading an article like 15 years ago.
Okay, Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call. I'll look into this. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And responding to Tom in Florida, just a little clarification for the sake of historical accuracy. Barack Obama's real biological father was Frank Marshall Davis. He met Obama's mother when they were both attending UH-Manoa out here. And he earned his living as a nude photographer and erotic fiction author. And Obama's mother was one of his models, and, well, you know, things happen. And Barack Obama is a love child from the 60s. And we have a lot of reasons to not approve of Barack Obama, but being a love child isn't one of them because it's not like it was up to him. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Let's see, from Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I really like your show. I like the format. You know, you give all the news one thing after another and not all the shouting and screaming that you hear on another program.
Okay.
Anyway, yesterday a guy called about computer problems with Windows 10. And we're having the same problem. I'm not computer literate, but my wife is on the conference, and she needs to know that site that you mentioned. I didn't write it down yesterday.
Well, just do a web search for GWX Control Panel, and you'll find it. And as a matter of fact, I did repost the link to that download page at WhatReallyHappened.com yesterday. I don't think that it's scrolled off the bottom just yet, but it's GWX Control Panel. And there's some other really good stuff out there, too, de-spying tools. And you know, it's very frustrating and angering that we have to take so much time away from productive work to defend our computers against Microsoft's arrogance. And I hope that class action suit actually moves forward against Microsoft. And I'm certainly going to sign on to it because I'm an old guy. I come from an age where the guiding philosophy of retail sales was the customer is always right, as opposed to today where the attitude is the customer will buy what we tell them to buy, and they will like it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, and I'm an old guy, too. So, you know, and I used to be in retail sales. So, you know, that's very, very true. Customer came in with a problem, whatever it was, you were to take care of it and believe them. So,
you know, got to have that customer satisfaction. All right. Well, listen, thank you. Thank you.
I'll be listening every day that I can.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words and for the phone call. And we're going to switch over to Johnny in California. Johnny, aloha. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
It's going fine.
Good. Well, I'm calling about needing help here in California with 10U gun laws, anti-gun laws that are on Governor Jerry Brown's desk.
Yes.
And I wanted to get the word out and to help us fight against this tyranny. And, you know, I love your show. I love what you do. And, you know, see if you can get your Rangers to call on Jerry Brown. And can I give his number?
I don't think that would be advisable. We could be accused of trying to organize a harassment campaign. But I'm sure that people in California can go to the state of California's website and get the contact information there. The problem is Governor Brown isn't listening to the people. Everybody in government right now is scared out of their minds that the American people are realizing what a bunch of crooks are in power, and they're getting ready to start issuing pink slips. Out here in Hawaii, they're now looking at a law where every gun owner will be automatically registered in the federal government's gun owners database. So they're really very much afraid right now. They want to start finding a way to confiscate guns. They're already taking them away from our serving veterans. Now they've got this new law out there where anybody with a declared mental illness can be stripped of their Second Amendment rights, which, if you understand that psychiatric diagnostic manual, everybody can be diagnosed with some mental illness, most of which are just made up out of thin air. like that one about the desire to eat healthy food is orthorexia nervosa. Anyway, listen, Johnny, got to let you go here. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call from the White Rose out in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
The other day you were talking about that Windows 10 attacking the computers, and you mentioned that if you had it only attacked the 64-bit architecture. Well, I got a machine that's 32-bit architecture, and just the other day, just shortly after you mentioned it, I looked on my machine and it was downloading Windows 10. I said, "Wow, I couldn't believe it." So I on the RBN front page, there's a link to that control panel, and I just downloaded it, and I did the standalone thing, and it fixed it right away. It got rid of all the Windows 10 nonsense, and the downloading stopped, and all the Windows, those Windows 10 logos that are in your bar, they got all removed, and I'm happier than can be. Thanks.
Well, I stand corrected on the 32-bit issue. I didn't think it was going to be a problem for 32-bit machines. What operating system are you currently running?
Windows 7.
Yeah.
This one machine says 32-bit architecture, but it says it's got 64-bit capability. So maybe that has...
Yeah, that's it. You may be running a 32-bit version of Windows 7 on a 64-bit machine, which means you're not getting the performance that you could. But again, I just reposted the website where you can download that GWX control panel to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com.
And it's also on RBN front page, too.
Okay, good for them.
Yeah, okay. Thank you much.
Thank you
for taking my call.
You got it. Thank you very much. Also, I found an online petition for people in California to sign demanding that Governor Jerry Brown not sign these 10 anti-gun bills into law. Again, he's not listening to the people. None of them are. Right now, they're just panicked out of their mind that the good times are about to end. The unending access to your wallet is about to go away, and the only way they can maintain their wealth, power, and privilege is to reduce us all to basically being slaves, disarmed, so that we will take the vaccines the state of California requires you to take, and you can't fight back about it. We're going to have another phone call. Pete in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I don't know if you discussed it today. I unfortunately was listening to the GCN stream, which was a repeat of yesterday, and I was having deja vu all over again here, but I wanted to talk about the Blue Lives Matter.
Hang on a second. GCN was running my yesterday show?
They're running it today. Yeah, it was like deja vu all over again. I'm hearing people, the same recording and thinking, what the heck's going on here? But
okay, because I know they've been running the older shows from before I moved to RBN. But anyway, please get on with what you wanted to talk about.
Thank you, sir. Blue Lives Matter in Louisiana. This bill, I don't remember the number, but what they want to do is protect police. If you attack police with the intent of attacking them because they are police and have a uniform on, and that goes for the firefighters too, I guess, but I don't see a lot of people attacking firefighters. If you attack the police, they'll call it a hate crime and charge you with a felony, 5-year imprisonment and up to $5,000 fine.
Well, it's a bunch of nonsense because the FBI has come on out and admitted that attacks on police officers are actually in decline. There is no war on the cops. It's just a PR stunt to try and make us feel sorry for the police officers who have gunned down more innocent Americans than the mass shooters and terrorists put together, and who, under the civil forfeiture laws, have stolen more from innocent law-abiding Americans than all the burglars and robbers and muggers put together.
Quite right. I don't remember what, I know this went on in Germany, I think, in the 30s.
Yes.
When they were creating all these laws protecting the government is protecting itself. That's been going on, steadily and slowly in this country for years and years and years. It's an enhanced crime for assault on a law enforcement officer, whatever the heck that word means. There's nothing constitutional about the police to begin with. Anybody can be a cop for that matter, as far as I'm concerned, because it's not in the Constitution. But, they have all these laws protecting the police, but what about protecting the citizens. I mean, that's the whole point of their existence. I mean, that's why we're
Well, it's
paying
the whole
tax.
point of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The laws are supposed to protect the people from the government, and we've gone completely the other way where the government is being protected from the people, and that's always the harbinger of dictatorship.
Exactamundo. That's all I got for you, buddy.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the news. Down in Venezuela, things are really ugly. They're running out of everything. And now Venezuelan doctors have gone on a hunger strike over the shortage of medicines in the hospitals and clinics. They're running out of everything. And we need to be studying what's going on in Venezuela right now because it's going to happen here. Because the end result of the debt created by private central banks, this economic war, is the collapse of the society. And it's going to spread like a contagion. Now, Venezuela has been a target of the United States government going back to Hugo Chavez. And if the U.S. would stop mucking about with other countries, we wouldn't see all this suffering going on. And we wouldn't have the whole world hating our nation and our government right now. There seems to be a new propaganda wave out there of bomb threats against schools in the United States and Great Britain. And, of course, they've yet to actually find any bombs. It's just people sending messages or phone calls saying, there's a bomb in your school, there's a bomb in your school. Made you look. And it is a reminder. We are coming up on the Memorial Day weekend. We know the U.S. government is desperate to find some way to move World War III into the hot phase against Russia and China. And we know our government has a long history of cover-ups, deceptions, and false flags to get the wars they want. And Memorial Day, of course, is a very symbolic holiday, and after that it'll be July 4th. But we need to be aware that these things are happening out there. And we need to keep our eyes open. If there's a big bang someplace, I guarantee you it's not the Russians and the Chinese. They don't want a war with the United States. It's the U.S. government and Wall Street that want a war because they think it's going to fix the economic problems or at the very least give them a fall guy to blame for the coming economic crash. They can get war with Russia going, then they can say, well, we had a recovery going, we were on the verge of turning the economy around and bringing back the jobs and everything, and gosh darn those Russians, they just spoiled it for everybody. No, they didn't. Now the scandal surfacing from the Clinton Foundation, apparently there's this little-known Swedish-Canadian mining conglomerate that apparently trades in what are called blood minerals. Has given $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. Now, blood minerals are sort of a broader version of blood diamonds. In other words, materials mined in war zones and being sold to finance political insurgencies or despotic warlords. Maybe. There's also another aspect. By declaring a certain source of diamonds or minerals to be conflict or blood diamonds, it discourages people from buying them and protects existing monopolies already trading in those materials. So we got to be very, very careful. But apparently this company gave $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. The former head of Morgan Stanley has been indicted for evading $45 million in taxes. Gosh darn it, he should have been down there in Panama, where rich tax evaders are supposed to be going. They're all crooks, they're all criminals. That's how they get to be that rich. If you really think about Wall Street and financial service, it really is a criminal operation. Because they're sucking all this wealth out of the general society, and in exchange, they're putting back nothing of substantive value. Look at all the money flowing into the pockets of Wall Street. Are we getting better roads for it? No. Are we getting more reliable infrastructure for it? No. It's just this giant vacuum cleaner in Wall Street that is sucking money out of the society with the connivance and complicity of the U.S. federal government, which gets their piece of the action as campaign donations and various other compensations. Now, as we've been talking about this last week, governments around the world, including the United Nations, are now in a bit of a panic. They are finally realizing that they have lost their long-cherished ability to lie to the general population with impunity and be believed. The old model, going up until the 1950s and 1960s, government would tell the media would obediently regurgitate it onto the general population, and the general population would just accept it as the gospel truth, and those few people who knew that it was all a hoax really had no voice out there. Well, all that's changed. The advent of the Internet and the independent media has changed the fundamental way that information flows through our society. And as a result, governments and corporations have lost that ability to lie to the public. It took something like 30 years to reach a point where half of Americans understood the Warren Report on the John F. Kennedy assassination was a lie. 30 years. Today, because of the Internet and the independent media, the lifespan of a government lie can be clocked with an egg timer. And I keep one here on the desk just for that purpose. So they're trying to find some way to shut it down. The United Nations is out there saying, we need a framework to control the Internet. Because if we can't lie to the people and be believed, we can't control them. We can't get them to pay carbon taxes. We can't get them to support Israel. We can't get them to go to war. They won't do what we tell them to do because they know we're lying. Now, there's an article that came out over in The Guardian talking about how people who are trying to remove damaging materials from the Internet are trying to use copyright law to do it by saying everything is copyrighted on creation and you cannot put this information up there because it's copyrighted and we'll sue you. And actually, this sort of gets into the area that we're going to be talking about next hour with DC Dave. But here in the United States of America, there is a portion of the current copyright law called the Fair Use Doctrine, which says that you can use copywritten material for the purposes of educating the public. And we know the forces that were behind the Digital Millennium Copyright Act were trying to get that removed, that fair use exemption, so that they could go back to a world where they would come up with a very glorious lie and copyright it and put it on out there, and you couldn't talk about it without violating their copyright to protect the lie. And in the end, it's not going to work. I keep going on back to the time of Gutenberg, where his rediscovery of movable type printing made books affordable to the middle class, literacy exploded, and the fundamental nature of information flow through society changed drastically. And those institutions that could evolve to the new reality of a better educated public survived. And those parties that couldn't evolve and adapt went extinct. Now, the U.S. government, unfortunately for them, is in that latter group. They are carrying the burden of 200-plus years of accumulated lies, fraud, and deception. They can't all of a sudden say, yes, you got us, we were lying about all this stuff, and survive. So they're going to go on maintaining the lies until finally the American people are just going to start ignoring them and it's going to collapse, as happened in the Soviet Union when the samizdat destroyed the Soviet Union's ability to lie to their people with impunity. It's a healthy thing. It's a good thing for you all to be skeptical. A skeptical people are a free people. You should never believe anything the government says simply because they are the government. And they have a long history of just lying to get what they want. And it's not unique to the U.S. government. It's been going on all along. All the way back to when Ramses II told his own people that he had defeated the Hittites at Kadesh, which was a bald-faced lie. So, anyway, now let's talk about GMO. Over in Burkina Faso, they have once again rejected the introduction of Monsanto's genetically modified cotton seeds. And they're going back to indigenous natural varieties. Monsanto's attempts to basically control world food production with GMO is hitting a major roadblocks everywhere they go along. Story coming out of journalneo.org. The amazing glyphosate revolt grows. And they're talking about all these individuals and scientists and even governments who are starting to say there is a problem with glyphosate. With the World Health Organization saying it is a probable carcinogen, and they probably would have said it's a definite carcinogen, except they were under tremendous pressure from Monsanto and corrupt politicians. But people are starting to talk about a global glyphosate ban because of all the harm being caused. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about Bayer, famous for selling hemophiliac medications contaminated with HIV, to basically take over Monsanto for $62 billion. And Monsanto has now rejected that offer. And probably a good thing for Bayer, because now Monsanto is being sued by farmers, claiming that Monsanto purposely mislabeled ingredients in Roundup to hide the fact that they were toxic and carcinogenic. So that's going to be a major issue. Meanwhile, Putin has closed the door to Monsanto in Russia. Putin wants to make Russia the global source for healthy, safe, organic, non-GMO food, and importers are already beating a path to his door to get safe and healthy food. So good for Putin on that one. Meanwhile, there's a 10-year-old boy got permanently brain damaged by a vaccination. He's got narcolepsy and a bunch of other problems. Just was awarded $174,000 by the courts. And I don't think that was even anywhere near enough to make the point that it's time for these corporations to stop this reckless selling of toxic, dangerous products into the general population. You're just not supposed to do that. All righty, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We have got a couple of phone calls waiting for us in the next segment, and then, of course, we're going to go to DC Dave at the top of hour number 3. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a couple of quick phone calls before the top of the hour. Katie in Texas, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Lost Katie.
We lost Katie. All right, John in Barbados, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Yes. For all those interested in horticulture and veggie growing and what have you, I have an alternative to Roundup. But you have to be careful of the overspray. It is also a lot cheaper than buying this nonsense from Monsanto. All one needs to do is buy vinegar,
yes,
put it in a bottle with some water, and be careful of overspray because it's going to kill everything it lands on.
Yes, I'm familiar with that one.
Yep, so that's a good alternative. And of course it's biodegradable.
Yep. Anything else?
Well, I was going to mention about the war effort, but I think you've dealt with that a long time ago. So I'll sign off for now and let the other lady have a
Well, we lost the other lady here, so if you have anything else you want to add, go for it.
Yep. Well, I've been looking at what's happening in this latest nonsense with Russia, Turkey, and Iran, looking to if you like, partner up, which would mend the fences between Turkey and Russia to some extent and go after ISIS and all these other groups. But I think maybe this is a bit of a blind because the Kurds are not going to be too happy with Turkey joining the fight with Russia.
Well, neither is the U.S. government, because up until now, Turkey has sort of been on the U.S. side of this whole situation going into Syria. And if Syria is now moving closer to Russia, that is a major geopolitical defeat for the United States government.
Well, yeah, it would seem that this is a serious, this recent visit between certain Turkish officials and Iranians it seems to be producing this effect. So who knows?
Well, we're starting to see a lot of countries start to rethink their association with the United States government. We're certainly seeing it among the European Union member states because of the tremendous economic harm they've suffered from U.S. government chest thumping relative to Russia. Everybody is looking at the disasters the U.S. has caused in Ukraine, Libya, Yemen, Iraq, and I think pretty much everybody's fed up with this agenda.
Well, it looks like the French farmers, which have a great big and heavy lobby in France, are lobbying the government to just ignore this economic sanctions with Russia and allow them to market their produce over there.
They've suffered tremendously, and it's certainly been a contributing cause to the current unrest in France, because the ECB is saying, give me money, give me money, give me money, and the French farmers are saying, how? We're not allowed to sell our products here. All right, John, I got to let you go here. We're going to take a quick break for station identification. Back with DC Dave after these few moments. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and joining us on the phone now is Dave Martin, also known as DC Dave, and Dave has been involved in the investigation into the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster right from the very, very beginning. I've known him for all these years. I'm not going to say how many because we're age sensitive. Don't want to be discriminated against because we're old guys. So Dave,
septuagenarian, they call me now.
Oh my goodness! Well, apparently you got a couple of years on me here. But I wanted to get you on the show. First of all, we have to just applaud Donald Trump's timing, because his coming on out and saying that there's something very fishy about the Foster death has made everything that we've been talking about for the last 22 years relevant again. It's current news, current events. The corporate media is panicking on this situation. So is the Hillary campaign. So
Blitzer was just panicking big time on CNN. Somebody alerted me with an email. And I watched their panel program. They had somebody from the New Yorker in their panel.
Well, the Washington Post is out there saying this is all so far-fetched. I mean, they're trying to protect the cover-up, but again, nobody's going to believe anything they have to say. Let's set the Wayback Machine, if you will, back to the very beginning and tell everybody how you first got involved in the case. Give us a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll get into this dispute that you're having over Peshman and this ridiculous theory being promoted about how
Robert Morrow. The Peshman is just a really negligible actor in this thing, but Morrow is the co-author of Roger Stone's book, Clinton's War on Women.
Yes.
And in their book, they take the Peshman theory and try to sell it.
Well,
which is it's pretty insidious.
I'm rather surprised, because my prior experience with Roger Stone was that he was pretty much a straight shooter. But again, we're talking about one of the great secrets that could delegitimize the entire government, and everybody's going to be out to protect that one.
Well, they have 2 chapters, and I've written a review. It's on I put the review on Amazon, a shorter version, and it's on my website, my review of the Clinton's War on Women, and I said they have 2 chapters on related to Foster, and they completely contradict one another. The second chapter is all about the Patrick Knowlton story and his harassment and all that. The witness,
yes,
and he and his lawyer and Hugh Turley are the people behind FBICoverup.com, which is the definitive website now on this. The whole Foster subject, it just sort of lay dormant for a long time. They just had their book up there, Failure of the Public Trust, with a few little things here and there.
FBICoverup.com is showing it's for sale.
FBICoverup.com now is Vince Foster Central.
They changed the name. Okay.
No, it's still FBICoverup.com, but what they've done is made it a much more active site that just draws in everything.
Okay, well, something funny is going on, because I just typed FBICoverup.com into my browser, and it's showing that it's for sale. The domain is for sale.
No. Well, no.
Is it .org by any?
You have to put a hyphen and cover up. FBI cover.
Okay.
Cover up.
My bad. My bad.
Put a hyphen and cover up.
Okay.
It's there. I mean, it's Foster Central now. All roads should lead to that website.
Oh, yeah, there we are. I'm looking at it now, and I'm going to link to it from WhatReallyHappened.com because, I have lived with this story for a lot of years. I mean, this was the story that inadvertently transitioned me from a career in motion pictures to being a truth activist, and it almost feels like we're finally coming full circle, and we're actually going to get some closure on this thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm fascinated in reading on your website how you got into it from your knowledge, just looking at that photograph and then seeing how phony it was with the gun in the hand.
Yeah,
and really, I was living and working here in Washington, and what clued me in right from the beginning was the curious, extremely curious behavior of the news media. It begins and ends with the news media. Their extreme lack of curiosity. I mean, come on.
Well, it was more than that. It was fear. I mean, because when I found the FBI's FD-302 forms where they were showing Lisa Foster a silver-colored gun, and using that to claim she identified the dark blue steel gun found with the body, I took it to friends I had at the West Coast News affiliates, NBC and ABC primarily, and they acted like they already knew, and they were just saying, no, we cannot touch this. It will be our jobs.
That's it. That's exactly what you encounter. It is obviously they determinedly incurious.
Yes.
Because they knew they could not afford to be curious. I mean, if you were here, I never heard of Fort Marcy Park. I've driven down the George Washington Parkway many times. There are two scenic overlooks over the river before you get to this little turnoff to Fort Marcy. You don't even notice it. You go right by it. It's sort of extraordinarily obscure.
Yes.
The only reason it's a park, it was part of the ring of forts around the Capitol building during the Civil War. And it's preserved for historical reasons. And they put a couple of old cannons in there to give you the flavor of what it was. But with the trees grown up, the fields of fire are all gone. The berms have been worn down with the passage of time. The earthenwork walls of the fort are hardly visible. And it's of no interest to anybody except a Civil War buff. And I'm something of a Civil War buff, but I didn't know about it. And that was the first thing. How would Vince Foster, just up from Arkansas, how would he even know about this place?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they from the day one they were saying apparent suicide. Well, I didn't see anything apparent about it. Why? That lack of curiosity. And then you see these reports which continue to this day. The people describe it as overlooking the Potomac. Well, no, it's not. It's not overlooking the Potomac at all. How can anybody write that and not even look at a Google map? You can see that it's not overlooking the Potomac. But they're writing like they know what they're talking about. They haven't even been out and looked at the damn place.
No.
And then this phony witness that came forward to G. Gordon Liddy, of all people, a former FBI agent, and involved in the Watergate, a proven liar. This confidential witness comes forward and throws out some what looks to be provocative stuff, but his story is the most ridiculous of all. That he discovered the body when he was looking for a place to pee. I mean, it's 300 yards up through the woods on a hot day, uphill most of the way.
Yeah.
Parking lot there is ringed with trees that you can get behind to pee.
Yeah.
There's no way in the heaven that he would have walked all the way up there to pee. You have to walk through a large clearing to get. This is not where you go to look. If he didn't discover the body. No, but he was there because the people that did discover the body prematurely were Goldbrick and park personnel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but they couldn't be relied upon to stay in line. They had to get somebody to, you know, that could be relied upon, somebody that they had their hooks in somehow. He's dead now. I can talk about him.
Yes.
Kermit Dale Kyle. And his full name, you know, they can't call him in all the official stories as C.W. or confidential witness. But his full name is Kermit Dale Kyle. He was a construction worker, and who knows what kind of hooks they had in him.
Okay, it kind of makes you wonder why they had to hide his name in the first place, and I guess it was to keep other people from like talking to him and saying, "Is this really what you saw?" And I mean, there were so many things that were being hidden about that. I mean, when they claimed they found that suicide note for Vince Foster, and they literally said, "You cannot show this to anybody, and we get it back when you're done with it." And it was torn up in that very strange way to get rid of the signature. But a photo of it did get out, and
I mean, supposedly he tore it up into 24 pieces, and in the act of tearing, would he have gloves on? Not a single Foster fingerprint on the paper is a pretty good retainer of fingerprints.
Yeah, and there were no fingerprints at all on that dark blued steel gun, and I think we can pretty much rest assured Vince Foster himself didn't clean it off after it was used.
And of course the absence of any blood and gore after you've blown your brains out, and there are no brains in evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, that was
38
the first
caliber, a very powerful weapon. It's designed to blow brains out.
And that was the first thing that I spotted about that picture, and I said it just didn't make any sense at all. They couldn't even link Vince Foster that gun with DNA. The DNA that was found on the gun was actually Hispanic in origin, and it just goes on and on. All right, so basically, we all know what's going on with the Vince Foster case, and remember, normal police procedure when you find a body is you presume it's a homicide, because covering up a murder by faking a suicide is a very, very common occurrence in the annals of crime. They did it to Deborah Jean Palfrey. They've done it to all these people. And so for them to come on out and say, oh, yeah, it was a suicide, nothing to see here, that, too, is a red warning flag. So let's move.
Right now, right here in Loudoun County, in a very rich neighborhood, there is a trial going on of a husband being charged with the murder of his wife, and he claims she hanged herself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but the evidence suggests otherwise. It strongly suggests otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But so, I mean, yeah, he wanted to fake it as a suicide, of course.
Well,
this is what murderers, guilty people do.
Yeah, they do, and the lack of interest in thoroughly examining the case. I mean, Vincent Foster was the highest U.S. government official to die in office since John F. Kennedy. And it was just like nothing to see here. And I remember when I first became aware of the case, the White House had leaked that photo of the gun in hand because there were so many people talking about the odd circumstances of the case. And so the White House thought leaking that photo was going to put everybody's mind to rest. See, there's Foster's hand, there's the gun, it was a suicide, please stop saying all this tinfoil hat stuff about the president.
Well, the leaking of the photo was set up by the guy now who's revealed himself as a phony, Christopher Ruddy.
Yes.
You know, Ruddy's now supporting the Clintons, of all things.
Yes.
You know, Ruddy had made the statement that the gun was in his right hand and Foster was left-handed. And he'd also made the statement that no crime scene photographs were taken. He said that in his New York Post article. Well, then that set him up, you know, to take the fall as a phony investigator, because then they produced this picture of the hand of guns. And see there, crime scene photographs were taken. And then they had him on 60 Minutes, and Mike Wallace asked him about this video they had produced in which they said that he was left-handed. And Ruddy looked real sheepish, you know. He said, well, that was the strategic investments. They're the ones that did that video, and then Wallace got back that. But you were an advisor on that, and Ruddy all he can do was look sheepish on 60 Minutes.
Well, I remember when
he was the fake opposition all along.
Well, I remember following the Oklahoma City bombing. I used to be in communication with Ruddy, and he tried to convince me a rock had blown up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. And at that point is when I realized that Ruddy was not a reliable source of information.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it took us a while to learn. And really, had it not been for Ambrose Evans Pritchard getting Patrick Knowlton involved, I mean, they had spelled his name with Nolton in the official report about the guy who he'd called and said that he was stopped genuinely to take a leak about 4:30, and he saw a car with Arkansas license plates on, you know, and
the guy who glared at him.
And the guy who glared at him. Well, then Ambrose did some really good gumshoe work. First, they had a phone number for him in the official report, and his name was spelled Knowlton. Well, he called the number, and the number didn't work. And so he looked in the phone book for the name Knowlton, you know, nothing came up. But then he was on his way to his a vacation house that he shared in Etland, Virginia, near Old Rag Mountain, with a couple other people, and so Ambrose went out to Etland's little small community in the mountains and started asking around. Do you know anybody named Knowlton? Yes, and it turns out his name is Knowlton. So then he found him, you know, and interviewed him and showed him his FBI 302s. You've seen it in the video that we just put out. How this came about, you know, that Knowlton said, I didn't say that. You know, he said they had reported that he couldn't identify the guy who looked at him. And Knowlton has a he's one of the sharpest memories anybody you've ever met. And he said, very definitely, you know, and then that's when they produced this sketch in the Sunday Telegraph of London of how Knowlton described the guy who was glaring at him. And also they had said that Knowlton had identified the car that he saw, that Arkansas license plates, as Knowlton's car. Yes, it was a Honda. Yes, it had Arkansas license plates. But he was adamant that it was an older model than the Foster car.
And a different color.
It was reddish brown.
Mm-hmm.
It was not silver gray. It was in no way was it the Foster car. So there you have it. He's lying dead in the back of the park at that time, and his car is not there.
Yes. The car didn't show up until later.
Yeah. And that really, you know, the whole thing was supposed to have been wrapped up by Starr. If it hadn't been for the Knowlton angle, you know, and then Knowlton and his lawyer got their comment ordered by the judges included in Starr's report as part of the official report, and their 20-page comment totally destroys the official story.
Yes.
But the newspapers completely blacked out the news of this part of the official report. You know, they say it's 114 pages, when altogether it's 137 pages, including the part that the judge is ordered to put in. And they really didn't have to, because the law required anybody who's named to be able to have to comment. But he was not identified by name.
Mm-hmm.
So Starr protested and said, no, you know, you don't have to do that. But the judges, and we found in the archives of Judge Bussner's papers in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the University of Virginia.
Dave, we're going to have to take a break here. Dave, we're going to have to take a break here. Hold that thought. We're going to come right back to this story after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Martin, also known as DC Dave. He's been part of the citizens' investigation into the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster right from the very, very beginning. And a reminder, as you listen to all this information, under normal police procedure in the United States of America, finding a dead body, the presumption is murder. Suicide must be proven, and as you will see, the evidence for suicide does not withstand close examination. So, Dave, can you just sort of pick up right where you left off?
Well, before I forget it, things are just breaking so fast. I got an email at 5:17. I'm looking at it right now from a contact of mine who's Canadian by the name of Peter Williams. And he says, right now, Wolf on CNN is blasting Trump on questioning the Foster death. He, effing Wolf,
yes,
he puts in parentheses, is overly adamant on it being proven a suicide. Now, he sends that to me and to open copy to me and to someone named Andrew Craig, K-R-E-I-G. I don't know if you know this guy. He's with the Justice Integrity Project in D.C. Well, anyway, Craig responds, open copy to me. Thanks, Peter. That may prove useful for my future work, but didn't have time to watch it. For your information, Chris Ruddy, a friend of mine who wrote one of the main Vince Foster books, says this is old news when I asked him about it 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I responded to both of them. I used to count that snake Ruddy as a friend too, but all you need to know about him now is in my article, Double Agent Ruddy Reaching for Media Pinnacle, and I link to it. It's on my website. It's all the latest on all we know about Ruddy at this point. This is not the 1990s anymore. He's not leading a parade anymore. We don't have phony people like Marinka Peshman are trying to lead the parade, but it ain't going to work. Okay.
No, even Matt Drudge. I mean, when I first found the FD-302 talking about a silver-colored gun, I sent it to Matt Drudge, and he wouldn't even touch it. And
there's another one.
Yeah.
Phony opposition.
Yeah.
The
gatekeepers.
Clinton Chronicles crowd. Good stuff up to a point.
Yep.
Larry Nichols, good stuff up to a point. But, no, FBICoverup.com is the horse's mouth on the citizens, and the most involved citizen, the witness who had his life turned upside down by that decision to stop off in Fort Marcy Park and relieve himself.
Well,
that's where the action is now.
Yeah, they wreck the lives of anybody who challenges the power. And when I tell people about what happened to me in Hollywood, and they say, "Oh, the government doesn't do this kind of thing," I'll say, "Go back and look at actress Jean Seberg, was very famous in the 1960s, and you read how her career ended, and you will see exactly what the FBI likes to do to people who don't go along with the story."
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, and you know what's really ironic about this? When I saw the Foster picture, I was still very naive. I thought our government was basically good, and there might be a few bad apples. And if somebody had called me up and said, "Look, we need you to not talk about this, it's national security," I might have even gone along. But when I got the thug treatment and the blacklisting is when I really began to understand the true nature of our government and what they like to do to people. I mean, they do behave like mafia thugs in these situations. All right, we're about 45 seconds away from another break. Our segments tend to be a little lopsided here. And when we come on back, I'd kind of like to move on to the current situation where there's this new theory that is attempting to reconcile all the known evidence about the body and how it was handled and still try and preserve this idea that Vince Foster really did kill himself, because this is going to be a major threat to Hillary's campaign. And all the Wolf Blitzers and the Washington Post and, they're not going to be able to help them, because these same people are the same ones who told us Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. And nobody's going to take anything they say at face value. So we're going to take a break for 4 minutes for some commercials, and we'll be right back with Dave Martin. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Martin, also known as DC Dave. We're talking about the very suspicious death of White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster during the Bill Clinton presidency. And again, homicide is always the presumption when a body is found. Suicide must be proven. And there are so many problems with the suicide story. A good example would be that the original description of Vince Foster's body is just a couple of trickles of blood coming out of his nose in two different directions, suggesting his head had actually been moved after the gunshot was fired into his mouth. And the absence of copious amounts of blood suggests that Foster was actually dead by some other means, possibly a broken neck, before the gunshot was fired into his mouth to make it look like a suicide. Because if you remember the Bud Dwyer video, when the brain is destroyed, the heart keeps on pumping until it runs out of blood. That's why motorcycle accidents are a tremendous source of donor hearts. That's why they had huge heaps of straw underneath the guillotines during the French Revolution. It is a messy, messy situation. And again, the evidence for suicide, where the body was found, it's non-existent. And so now there's apparently this new harebrained theory trying to save Hillary Clinton from this scandal and reconcile it with the evidence that something funny was going on. So Dave, why don't you give us the new improved lie, as it were?
This is Marinka Pashman's in her book Following Orders.
Which she clearly is.
Yeah, she is, I think. That Foster came back to the White House after nobody saw him, sneaked back into the White House, and went to his office, and with that same gun that we found, that they say the same gun that was in his hand, blew his brains out there. And she says that's why the White House people didn't let the investigators into his office until some hours later, because they were cleaning up the mess, blah, blah, blah. And that when the couple of loyalists heard the gunshot, they rushed to the office and saw what had happened. And then they got on the phone to who she calls X, and then describes X as clearly Hillary, who's out of town at the time, who they panic. And of course this notion that you're going to compound the embarrassment by you're moving the body out. I mean, that's pretty absurd on its face.
It's also obstruction of justice.
They're trying to conceal the suicide? Wait a minute. No, you conceal murder. Why would you try to conceal the suicide? Suicide's a suicide. What's to conceal here? Well, anyway, now, there's several problems. Now, why did she conclude that, and what does Linda Tripp have to do about it? I had to go back and read it again, because I didn't have it in the first review I did, because Linda Tripp had been the person who was determined that he had not had anything in his hands when he left, including his briefcase. Mm-hmm. And but the briefcase later turns up in his office.
Yes.
So, how did it get back in his office? Oh, he brought it back in his office. He himself came back with his briefcase. And Linda Tripp, in her long conversations with Marinka, hedges and finally and says, well, maybe my memory's mistaken. And at that point, Marinka says, aha, so there it is, you know. And you get the impression from reading the book that this really originates, this whole crazy story originates with Linda Tripp. But she wouldn't have, working in the White House, she knew that this didn't happen. She didn't, Marinka never runs that theory by, in their book, she never runs the theory by Linda Tripp, who was the secretary to Bernie Nussbaum, who was, the boss of Foster. She never runs it by Linda Tripp because Linda Tripp knows full well what would have happened. Imagine this. A loud 38 going off in the bowels of the White House.
Secret Service would have been there.
On Pennsylvania Avenue even.
Secret Service would have been there in 5 seconds flat.
There would have been a lockdown like we just saw.
Absolutely.
It would have been, I mean, this is the most absurd, outrageous, ridiculous. I called it batty in my review, and it's batty.
It is batty, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, when you're dealing with an office with carpeting and upholstery on the chairs and everything, no, you cannot clean blood and brain spatter up so it's undetectable no matter, there's going to be a blood stain there. Period. End of discussion.
Well, I mean, to launder that office would have required carpenters and all kinds of people. It would have taken days.
Yes, absolutely. And second, the White House is the most secure building in the country, if not the world. There is no record of Vince Foster ever leaving the White House at all that day. He simply vanished.
Here was my first real problem with Ruddy. I had a coworker who had worked for the MITRE Corporation, the CIA connected organization.
Yes.
MITRE. And he heard me talking my skepticism about the story, and he said, well, let me tell you what I know. The MITRE Corporation installed the surveillance equipment at the White House. He says it's the best in the world.
Yes.
It could tell you whether Foster shaved with a safety razor or an electric razor, and how close he shaved in the morning. I mean, and so all the official record is when he left the building, the White House, not when he left the compound. He could have been inside that compound, the old executive office building, next door to it. He could have just been going, and some of the legal people that have offices over there, he could have just been going over there. The big question is, was he with anyone when he left the compound? At what time did he leave the compound? And by what means? Did he leave by car or by walking?
Or by carpet? Because remember,
or in a carpet.
Because remember, when his body was found, it was covered with all
the surveillance record. So I took that to Ruddy, and I said, well, what about that? Because he didn't raise the issue either. He said, well, we'll have to look into it. A few days later, he got back to me with this story. Would you believe?
Mm-hmm.
He told me that his contact inside the White House, which he wouldn't name, had told him that Clinton had all of the surveillance equipment taken out because it was cramping his tomcatting style, and he liked to go out and carouse. And so they were seeing him when he was coming and going. Now, if you believe that. So, anyway, I said, okay, all right, that's his story, and he's sticking to it. I took it back to the former MITRE Corporation guy. So here's what Ruddy told me. And he just rolled his eyes. Yeah. Sure. Would you believe that?
No, I wouldn't believe that at all because, again, Now, Foster may have left his office right after lunch because, remember, Louis Freeh was just now that day being sworn in as the new head of the FBI. Right. And he probably, walked over to see that ceremony. But then he, obviously went someplace else inside the White House compound. And again, there is no record, no video, no logbook of Vince Foster leaving the White House compound under his own power. So the only logical explanation is he was lured someplace private inside the White House. Maybe,
lured. That's exactly.
Yeah,
somebody he trusted. He went out with them on the hoof. That's the easiest way to get him to where you want to dispose of him, was on the hoof.
And then I think the most likely explanation is he was rolled up in an old carpet because, remember, his body was covered with all these multicolored threads and probably taken out through the tunnels either to Treasury Building or Blair House across the street because those are not monitored for outgoing traffic by the Secret Service.
Yeah, well, but the surveillance cameras would tell you all. It's just like in 9/11 and the Oklahoma City bombing and you name it, where there's surveillance cameras, the FBI immediately grabs them and nobody sees what they show anymore. When you got cover-ups involved, FBI is the people you need.
Yeah, the cameras malfunctioned, we deleted the files, the dog ate my data disks and all the rest of it. But, another...
Speaking of malfunctioning, the X-ray machine and the autopsy,
Yeah, I remember that one as well. And, of course, now they've uncovered the medical report confirming there was a gunshot wound to Vince Foster's neck. What I surmise, what my theory is Vince Foster was lured to an assignation, possibly with Dee Dee Myers, because she developed a heck of a drinking problem after Foster died. I think he was murdered inside the White House, and the body dumped in Fort Marcy Park.
And the murder weapon was probably a low caliber, low velocity, with a silencer on it.
I have a slightly different opinion.
His neck and aimed up into his brain by a skilled assassin who pulled the trigger. The bullet never exited. That's what the X-rays would have shown.
I have a different theory. I think he was killed by breaking his neck. They took him into Fort Marcy Park. They fired a gun into his mouth, but it wasn't the .38. It was a .22. The bullet actually bounced off the skull out the neck, and that's why they had to hide the neck wound. That's what I think. That's what makes the most sense to me.
That's possible, but of course we have verification of the neck wound in Dr. Hout's report, which Turley and the people who found that were Hugh Sprunt and Patrick Knowlton in the archives. And on the front it said a wound mouth to head, but you can see it's been whited out. And on the back side, they didn't change it. It was mouth to neck.
Yeah, they missed that.
They didn't realize that they were sloppy. They're government workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you look carefully at what was whited out, you can see a little bit of the word neck there.
And that's not how you correct an official.
Dr. Hout observed a neck wound.
And that's not how the proper way to correct a medical document. You do a single line strikeout and initial it before you make the change. When they're whiting it out, they're trying to hide it. And you're right, they were sloppy. They wanted to change this botched gunshot that went mouth to neck to mouth out of back of head, because the very first people who looked at Vince Foster's body kept insisting they didn't detect any wound at the back of the head. That appeared to have been added later, during the...
No, of the 20-some people at Fort Marcy Park, not a single person observed an exit wound in the crown of the head. Yet the autopsy diagram shows a 50-cent size exit wound like you would expect. Well, imagine what would have been down bullet, downstream from an exit wound that size. It would have been an incredible amount of blood and gore.
There would have been huge amounts of blood on the front of Foster's shirt if he'd been alive when he was shot in the head, because the heart will keep on beating, but there were only a couple of trickles.
Yeah.
Then when they moved the body, blood poured out of it, which is why I think Foster was already dead when the gunshot was fired into his mouth to make it look like a suicide. It was sloppy work, coming out of a mindset where we can just tell the American people that bullets change course in midair and magic bullet this and that and be believed. But those days are really gone forever.
Some other things that neither Ruddy nor Marinka Peshman likes to talk about was his weekend, what he was up to that weekend before the Tuesday. You know, the Washington Post said that he was meeting with the Cardozos, Michael and Harold and Cardozo over on the Eastern Shore in Easton.
Yes.
What they don't tell you is that Harold Cardozo is the daughter of Nate Landau, a major political bagman, you know, major contributor, of a big supporter of Al Gore.
Yes.
And it was Nate Landau's estate, because Hugh Turley went out and looked at the property records. He couldn't find anything in the property records in Easton in Talbot County, where Easton is, on the Eastern Shore, any property for Michael Cardozo. But it turns out it wasn't his property. It was Nate Landau's estate that he was meeting on.
Mm-hmm.
Landau has a lot of nefarious connections. He was up for an ambassadorship to the Netherlands some years before, and that fell through when it had come to light that Nate Landau had casino investments in the Bahamas with the Meyer Lansky organization, mm-hmm. and the mafia family. God, I can't think of the name. The big mafia family. Anyway, major mob connections. So what's transpired on that weekend when he's meeting with these people, and then he has a long closed door meeting with Marcia Scott, one of the key Clinton aides. And Linda Tripp said that he had brief meetings with her with the door open. But this time they met for more than an hour with the door closed. Officially, Marcia Scott can't remember what they talked about. Believe that?
Well, no, I don't. Would you like to know my theory for the motive for why Vince Foster was killed?
I don't know what. Okay, I'd like to hear your theory.
Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting. Only a week before he died, Foster was out making a speech at a university talking about personal integrity. And, Vince Foster was in charge of preparing the Bill Clinton Presidential Blind Trust, which was 6 months late. And we know from
and really, as an employee of the government, he shouldn't have been doing that. That was illegal in itself. But that's typical.
Okay, we got to take another 3-minute break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America! Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today, and Dave, we've got about 4 minutes left. What do you want to share with our listeners?
Well, it's the Gambino family. Yes. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, Nate Landau had, but initially I had seized upon another connection. Foster was handling the account with the Rose Law Firm of Jackson Stevens, an investment firm guy in Little Rock. Jackson Stevens is credited with bringing BCCI to the United States.
Yes.
The largest criminal conspiracy ever, Bank of Commerce and Credit International with CIA links.
Yes.
And then there's a matter of the Promise software and Inslaw that he seemed to have some connection to. But I want to hear your theory as to why they killed him.
Well, basically because the Presidential Blind Trust was 6 months late. Foster was in charge of preparing that, and we know it was a fraudulent blind trust because during Whitewater testimony, the White House staff commented that there was a filing cabinet full of the Clintons' personal financial papers in the residence, which is a violation of the blind trust, which means while Bill Clinton was president, they had access to their money in order to take advantage of inside information they had from the Oval Office, which is exactly what the blind trust is supposed to prevent. Now, Foster had to realize that as the attorney signing his name to the documents, if the fraud were ever discovered, he would be going to jail. And he had been telling friends and family days ahead of time that he was going to resign as White House Deputy Counsel, and he did have an appointment scheduled with Bill Clinton for the day after his death. And that so-called suicide note was written in two different hands. The center portion is Vince Foster's handwriting, but if you read it by itself without the surrounding paragraphs, it looks like an outline for a letter of resignation. And had Foster resigned, leaving the blind trust unfinished, it would have brought more attention to the blind trust and why it was so late. So I think that's why Foster was killed. And the blind trust documents were completed and sent to the trustee 3 days later. We don't know who finished filling them out, but somebody forged Vince Foster's name onto that document.
Yeah, well, in one place, in my America's Dreyfus Affair, which you have very nicely put up on your website, I talk about his being rendered beyond subpoena.
Yes.
His death. And allude to the blind trust as well. So I think that could well be why. But it's kind of like who killed John Kennedy. There were so many people with a motive.
True.
And it's like Jerry Parks, according to Ambrose Evans Pritchard interviewing the widow of Jerry Parks who was murdered. You know, the security guard for the Clintons in Arkansas. When he heard that Foster had died, he turned white as a sheet and told his wife, "I'm a dead man."
The Clintons are cleaning house.
What was that about?
Yeah. Well, we know from the dead bodies list. There's the music. We are out of time. Dave, I'm going to have you back on the show at some point in the future. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. A reminder, we're going to have attorney Alan Favish on our show Thursday, continuing the discussion on the very strange death of Deputy White House Counsel Vincent Foster. So we're going to head on out of here now. Have yourself a good evening. I got to do some errands. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Share what you know with everybody that you know, and aloha America.